Hi, friends. We are back again. I'm Shankar Hemmady, and we are talking about soaring through chaos. And I have with me a dear friend, Paul Zelizer, who I got to know about, I think, 8 years ago through an amazing organization called Wisdom 2.0, which happens every year as a major conference in the San Francisco Bay Area. This year, they were just able to beat the corona and have the workshop in time, but with social distancing and everything before California went into shelter in place. But I'm so grateful I met amazing people like Paul. And Paul has been a big help, not only to me, but probably to thousands or even millions of people in his own ways. So without me introducing you, Paul, tell us about yourself. How did you get into this? What was your journey like?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Shankar, and it's wonderful to see you again, and I'm so grateful to know you. In terms of how I got into this, when I was 17 years old, I was getting in trouble with drugs and alcohol, and I had a particularly bad evening. And I woke up the next morning feeling terrible on every level. And a very wise woman said to me, Paul, you are wired for poignant experiences. You're wired for poignant experiences. And this goes one of two ways. Either you have a lifetime of drama and addiction and maybe you die young, or there are these things called awareness practices. And there's a lot of them. And I don't really care which one, but I think you might want to go check them out. And if you do, you'll live a life of service and you'll feel alive and you'll feel good. When you look back on your life, you'll say, I lived a good life. And she said, I hope you make that choice. And she didn't have she wasn't trying to get me into her religion or her brand. It wasn't about her being a guru or her guru was the best. She really helped explain my own nervous system to me. And I heard her at 17. I started checking out meditation and yoga and contemplative Christianity and Sufism and Buddhism and I'm not 17 anymore. So,
But you do have the energy of a 17-year-old.
I just got back from a 9-mile run this morning along the river. Yeah, I have a little bit of energy, right? And some of that is from trying to, learning how to take care of myself and be skillful with my energy. But anyway, that's the short version. There's been a lot of twists and turns since then, and a number of different iterations of what that's looked like in terms of my work, but that conversation changed the trajectory of my life, and I'm really grateful to her.
Wow, so from psychedelic nirvana to understanding awareness and what is life about. And you were a teenager then. That's really
I was
amazing to
17,
hear.
yeah.
And we've known each other for a long time, but somehow we never really talked about things that are so dear to our heart. And when I've always known you as that patient person, I tend to lose patience fairly easily.
I have my moments, Shankar. Believe me, I have my moments.
So Paul, I mean, as you know, we are in this amazing time here, which a lot of us fear. There are times when we also go through this panic, loss of life, loss of jobs, income, all kinds of things. The world is literally shifting as we speak. My question to you is, as you experienced going through a teenage person's journey where it's all about finding meaning in a different way. Right now, we have people of all ages, from children all the way to adults and even grandparents, worried, concerned. And the question that everybody's asking about is, what's the meaning of all this? And how do I find that deeper meaning, if there is one? Because it seems like I don't even know who created this. This is this blame game going on. Do you know what I'm talking about, Paul? So what do you tell people, or what do you tell yourself?
Over the past number of years, Shankar, my values have become increasingly important to me. And some very wise people said, as I was on this spiritual journey, that there's a tradition that living a good life is knowing what your values are and then trying to weave them into every area of your life, whether it's what which shoes do you buy? I do a lot of trail running, so I needed a new pair of trail. What brand do I buy? Where do I spend my money? What do I do for work? That's a huge, if you want to understand my journey, you know, wisdom teachers have told us that the single most precious resource we have as human beings is our attention. And in a modern economy, most adults spend the majority of their waking hours working. So like, you know, I love my daughter and I have great friends and I love to be physically active and spend time in nature and I meditate and I play guitar, right? And I work more than any one of those things. And I work less than the average American adult, right?
Wow.
Um, so there's just a lot of concentrated attention, which again, wisdom teachers tell us is our most precious resource going into work in a modern economy. So for me, there's just a lot of empowerment and a lot of leverage for positive impact in the world if I know what my values are, and then I start to bring these areas of my life, you know, what am I doing for work? How am I relating to my child? And, you know, what about the other people in my life? What do I choose to live? I now live in a tiny house, right? I've downsized when my daughter went off to college, and, you know, really try to make values the central choice point of my life, from everything from, you know, where do I live and what do I do for work and what do I buy or not buy and how do I eat and how do I spend my time. And if I'm living a values aligned life, I certainly am trying to help what's going out, you know, in the outside world, but I'm not so much like, I'm not a victim of what the outside world is doing. I know what my values are and making my choices accordingly. And whether it's a particularly hard day in terms of what's going on in the news and I really don't like it, and there have been a lot of those lately, or it's like there's some things that I like better, I'm still making the choices about my values and putting that at the center of my life. And that feels really empowering to me, even though there are big things going on that I'm deeply concerned about.
I remember that you had the first breakout session along with Ben Salzman at Wisdom 2.0 when I first met you. I was there for the last 5 minutes of that session, which must have been about a couple of hours long. But
I think it
those
was an
last,
hour. Yeah, we had like 800 or 900 people or something. Like, it was a big one. I remember that. Yeah.
and I was there for the last 5 minutes, and I was so touched that I went up to you and I said, all I want to do is give you a big hug.
I remember that. That was so sweet.
So I mean, I would like people to know what kind of work you're actually doing, and even that conscious entrepreneurship track that you were on. This was way back 7, 8 years ago, and many things what led to it and what's going on with it, because we know that sooner or later, when we have 30 million people without jobs in the United States, or probably closer to like 100 million or more without jobs in other places, that there is a need for meaning. There's a need for work that will take care of our physical needs, you know, other things. So I want you to talk about that. How and where is that movement going? Because I've been grateful to be a part of that movement along with you.
Thanks, Shankar. Well, yeah, this is so. Before I did this, I was basically a social worker doing community work. And so the issues were similar. How do you get like the basics to people and do some intervening in the intergenerational cycles where, you know, inequality. Some people get more, some people get less. And I've been trying to think about that and do something for my entire professional life. But being a social worker and working through, you know, these systems that were underfunded, it always felt like we were fighting for scraps to try to do this work. Nonprofits, or, you know, you work for a school system or an agency. It was just always, so after 15 years of great work, it was fabulous work. But I got tired of feeling like taking care of people was like, you had to fight for the scraps, and the horsepower was over here in business. And that it was, you know, about 13 years ago that the ideas and the frameworks of social entrepreneurship started to show up on my radar. Nowadays, it's one of the most fastest growing, most popular majors on college campuses all through North America, and is growing around the world. So as often happens, sometimes I'm an early adopter. I kind of knew that on some level. We got to get the people who want to help people and where the engine is, and we got to put those. It's not an original thought, but I got in on that conversation fairly early, about 13 years ago. So the basic idea is that we can have that same kind of, just like personally, we can know what our values are and make life choices, what kind of car we drive, or do we drive a car? Where do we live? And, you know, et cetera. We can do that in business as well. And particularly if you're the owner of a business or the founder of a business, there's an incredible opportunity to have a lot of positive impact with each choice you make. And that's the fundamental idea of social entrepreneurship. And I saw a lot of opportunities. There were people who were meditating and thinking very thoughtfully about what kind of choices they were making. And then they go to work in a company that when you actually talk to them, are like, the values of this company, I like the paycheck, but I don't really like what we're doing. We're making widgets, or we're, you know, subtly trying to get people hooked in to spend more and more time on their phone, and that's our business model, or whatever. And I'm a part of that, and I'm a smart person, and that's not really what I want to be doing in my life. I want to be helping people in a more matched up with my values kind of a way. So over the past 13 years, been thinking a lot about that and talking to really smart entrepreneurs. And so the way it looks now, 13 years in, we have this community. Well, what you can see, what I call in front of the paywall, we have a podcast. It's called Awarepreneurs. We twice a week now, so like 8 or 9 times a month, we sit down with somebody who's really thought about this. We call it a deep dive interview. And we unpack, why did they start what they've started? Sometimes we did an interview recently with somebody who is a leader in the social entrepreneur movement in India. Or we met with somebody who has maybe the single leading biggest social entrepreneur podcast on the planet, Tony Lloyd and his social entrepreneur podcast. Or somebody who built an app that's using blockchain to get people who are falling out of the mana-based people. They're falling out of people who, like, let's say, are in a refugee camp and they can't get access to traditional banking because, you know, maybe they ran in the middle of the night and they don't even have papers. But you can use thumbprints or eye prints to make sure this really is Paul. He really is a human being, and yes, he deserves a bank account. And even though Paul can't open a bank at a regular bank account, he can get into this system where people are being really smart about using technology to give somebody who's living in a refugee camp. And that person goes from living like on $1 or $2 a day of handout beans and rice to actually being able to work and making $10 or $20 a day. And suddenly their kids can afford shoes and go to school and, you know, whatever. We learn how people are actually doing it on the ground from real world examples. And then the business part of it is Awarepreneurs is a community where people pay an affordable membership each month to be in a, right now we have, I think, 317 members, and we support each other in, will you take a look at the write-up of my new offering, or I need somebody who can build me a website or make a logo for this kind of brand, or do Facebook ads, or can you help me get on podcasts? We just help each other grow these kind of brands that are very deeply based on what we call conscious business, social impact, and awareness practices. So that's what Awarepreneurs is all about.
And you know what really impressed me, as you correctly pointed out, the idea of conscious entrepreneurship or conscious business or conscious capitalism wasn't new. There were, I think, even books at that time. The big difference I saw, Paul, was you were able to bring a community together. And this was a grassroots community of everybody, including former social workers like you, to hardcore business people in Silicon Valley, people at Google and Facebook, and people like me who are like, oh, I've been doing electronics and biotechnology for so long. I want something even more meaningful. I want to be there where the people are hurting. And how can I do that without the big fear at that time was, how do I not mess up my lifestyle? You know, we are so used to that paycheck and that certain bracket that we live in. And that was my biggest fear. What shifted for me was I really wanted to try out the gift economy, and I was able to, especially in India. When I went to India, India still has a very strong culture, and that's true about rural America, rural India, rural anywhere. There's a strong culture of sharing and bartering, and sometimes unconditional sharing. And that was a big thing. And I want to thank you formally for that. I don't think I came back and told you yes, it made a difference. The last 3 years, I've been going literally around India now, South Korea, the Bay Area. Now I'm in Cuernavaca, Mexico, Chihuahua. So essentially, I'm being supported by people. People.
Mm.
It's not always the same people who benefit from my work. It's some people who see the value in it and say, "Hey, Shankar, here's my home. Hey,
Mm.
Shankar, please come and have dinner with us the next 3 days. Hey,
Yeah.
Shankar, would you like some clothes?" All kinds of things
Yes.
without
Yeah.
asking. That's the beauty of it. Could you tell us about any such stories? Because I'm telling you, you and Ben were a big part of my journey.
Mm.
Ben came from the Enneagram and the more psychometric tests as well as self-awareness, and you came from the creation of the community, bringing people together both in the virtual world as well as in on the ground. We had meetings in Palo Alto, we had meetings in San Francisco, and you had meetings in New Mexico where you live. Tell us more about how it made a difference to many other people. I can tell you this was, I'm just grateful for people like you who helped me
Mm.
along the way to find that it's possible to live like that.
Thank you, Shankar. You're very sweet. Thank you for your kind words. What can I say? It
Can you
feels,
give examples of people who have had a shift,
yeah,
including your own, if
absolutely.
there's any?
Yeah, sure. Well, just to wind back a little bit, part of the reason I'm such a big proponent of community, there's two things I want to say about, and then I'll give examples.
Yes.
One is I just want to give deep gratitude to my mentors here in New Mexico. I've been in New Mexico since 1993, and many people talk about they have a spiritual teacher that changed their life. This place is the biggest teacher and the people in of this place. People in New
Wow. And I've
Mexico,
never been to New Mexico so far. I was going
it's
to.
a fabulous place, and when you come, you know, there will be much love for you, and we will feed you and all that good
I was
stuff.
on my way, and then the
I know you
coronavirus.
were. I'm so bummed that we didn't get to connect. But I just want to say that this place, it looks like on the outside, you know, we're the 50th of 50 economies. We're at the bottom, so it looks like
Oh, I did not know that.
traditional economics, we face many challenges, and that's true on one level, but that sense of taking care of each other when maybe you don't, to most, at least Americanized, have less than what would be typical in a place like Silicon Valley or New York. The cost of living is less here, but also the average family income is much less here compared to what's true for most of the US. But that sense of caring for community and looking out for each other is something that isn't just a nice social media meme. People have learned how to do that, and it's kept cultures alive here in a way that most of America isn't as skilled at. And how I've learned how to do that came from living here and my mentors and teachers and community work. So that's the first thing I want to say. And the second thing I want to say is it was really important to me when we started. Many people have their, you know, Paul Zelizer's or the awarepreneurs approach to doing social enterprise. First you do step one and then you do step two. And, you know, I do try to offer my clients who come to me for one-on-one coaching some ideas. But with awarepreneurs, I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be a community, and rather say, this is the way. I want to say, Shankar, how are you doing it? And here's how I did it. And how did this person over here in Germany do it? And how did this person in India do it? And we're going to do an interview with somebody who's, you know, really involved in the Colombia social entrepreneur ecosystem. And, you know, each person and each culture and where you live and the kind of person you want to help and the kind of thing that you're selling, whether it's a product or a service, each one is a nuance and there's no right answer. And I wanted it to be a place where we shared about what we're actually doing and how is it working, rather than theory or any one person's model. So that's one thing that I got really clear about early on in our journey. In terms of some ways that it works or some examples, we've got somebody right now who's getting a lot of traction in a leadership brand, and the community helped her, you know, reinvent her business and we're helping her learn how to use LinkedIn. And she's getting really good traction with working with conscious leaders. Boy, what can I say? There's a lot of examples. We have a lot of young people who come to us, which I'm really thrilled about. And they're like, oh my gosh, I finally got to talk to somebody who has a business like mine. And that helps them get over the hump. I can think of 3 examples of people, young people who had ideas, but they didn't know anybody who was actually doing anything like that. And being in the community or listening to a podcast or getting to talk, a lot of awarepreneurs are especially generous with their time if there's another community member. And they sat down and they talked to somebody, and the win was it got them up and over the hump of like thinking about doing it to launching it. And when a young person says, I'm gonna actually do this thing, and they hit go, that's just a moment that I am thrilled to celebrate. We do a lot of uncovering stories. So one of the interviews that's most in the podcast that most just took my breath away, we had an interview with Peter Sanchez, who's a fabulous, it's a cultural preservation social enterprise. And he told us how they 10x'd their, they do a educational, like before and after school educational programming here in New Mexico. And they went from being a very small grant funded program for a couple of schools in very challenging place, very challenged schools in the South Valley in Albuquerque, to becoming the biggest provider of before and after school programming in the state, all with deep attention to cultural preservation. Peter and his family have been in New Mexico for 400 years, and how they 10x'd it and have no grant money and completely, it's the best before and after school programming in the state with no grant money, all funded by families that are paying what they can, almost no turnover in terms of the teachers who work in the program because they love to be there. Like those kind of stories are what get me.
It's a completely self-sustainable model.
Completely self-sustaining.
With no grants, no support
in the lowest economy in the United States, in some of the most challenged neighborhoods, with a very deep awareness of cultural preservation. And the other programs are mostly like, let's play soccer before school, or like, let's do art. This was really strong tutoring, but doing it in a way that kids and families love. The teachers love to do it. There's very little turnover, and it's now the biggest provider of youth before and after school programming in the state with no grant funding in the poorest state in America.
Wow. In fact, if I may interrupt you there, I found very interesting but similar examples in tribal communities in India.
Yeah.
I went to some of the poorest tribes where I went along with some social workers or NGOs about doing an intervention. And lo and behold, it actually became the other way around. We found that by conventional metrics of return on investment, cash put into it, and so on, there was very little cash that was being put into that community, just like what you said. And the ROI measures didn't even exist. There were no formal documentation of money creation, wealth creation, and all those things, right? But there was so much gratitude in that community. There was so much trust. And this, in what you call these intangibles, were so huge that with a little bit of different style of agriculture, for example, like retaining groundwater, or what is it called, rainwater and all
Catchment,
that.
yeah.
But they taught us many things we didn't know.
Yes.
So instead of us telling them what to do, in one place I went to get into dance therapy and use of dance, they taught us many dance forms that were already there in the community. And they said, are you talking about this? And I'm like, oh my God. So ended up that I went all around India in tribal communities, and I must have learned more than 25 dance forms, which are very ecstatic and very rooted in the culture. Near the oceans, praying to the ocean, and swimming with the tides, and like taking your fishing along with the ocean. in the mountains, how they talk to each other. And I found out these are not just limited to India. There are people that make sounds and talk to each
Mm,
other in the mountains.
nice.
And I was just astonished by a lot of things I learned. So the speaking of ROI measures, speaking of this thing may not even make sense in some of those cases, but you're absolutely right. By conventional measures, it may not make sense, but by how much I learned from the experience, having been through Stanford, having been through Silicon Valley, 3 startups, the best lessons in beyond entrepreneurship, in being human, in learning what it's like to be human, and
Mm.
learning what it's like to have fun and joy, and what is really sacred, what is really meaningful. So I'm so grateful you brought this up. And I had no idea New Mexico, by conventional measures, is at the bottom of the 50 states now. But what is interesting is that's where you see a lot of these human connections, right?
It's a,
So given the scenario that so much is shifting right now, by conventional measures, Hertz declared bankruptcy. JCPenney, I mean, these are big brands in the US.
yeah,
Likewise, in India, some of the biggest companies are giving 50%, 80% pay cut to their middle managers and so on. I
yes,
don't want to mention any names, but the reality is it's not easy. In
yes.
short, the airlines, many others. My question to you is going beyond the conventional ways of measuring shareholder returns, this thing. As an individual looking for something meaningful to do you have any suggestions for them? How can they find something more
Mm,
meaningful to do? 30, 40 million people are facing the likelihood that they're not going to go back to the same job.
yep.
And I don't think they want to go back to another job and another situation 5 years down the line. This isn't the first time we've had a financial upheaval. This time we have
Yeah.
financial and health. But we've had the fiscal cliff, we've had 9/11, we've had many such in the US, and worldwide, we've had wars, all kinds of things.
Yep. You know, there's 4 questions I work with my clients, and I think they're really helpful questions for anybody who's asking themselves, how do I create a livelihood that is based on my values? And those 4 questions, they're very simple, but if you ask them and you go deep with them and you ask them in the right order, I think they can really help. So the first question is why? The second question is who? The third question is what? And the fourth question is how. And many of us want to jump to how, right? I just want, oh my God, what do I got to do? And then and like, I need a plan. And am I going to like work on applying to this or my startup business plan? I'm like, whoa, hold on. Start with why. Simon Sinek's great, TED talk or his book, Start with Why. Why do you care about this thing? And people can tell, even in the midst of a financial cliff, like you said, we just like cratered our economy. Awarepreneurs is growing, right? We're going to be okay because people feel our why. And I've spent years like really going deep on the values. I don't have time to go into all of that. It's not really about awarepreneurs. I'm just saying, if you look at companies that have a clear values base, another example of do some research, listeners, about what's happened with green investment funds or values-based investment funds compared to single bottom line ones. Single bottom line is just make me a bunch of money. I don't really care what you invest in, right? Green or sustainable investment funds have weathered this chaos much, much, much better because people are asking questions about what they're doing with their money around values. What are your personal values? And whether it's going to be to get another job, I think social entrepreneurship is like going to be a very important skill set going forward. So if you're going to start something or bring a social entrepreneur's mind to a company, it's called an intrapreneur, right? Know your why. What are your values and why are you doing this thing that you're proposing to do, right? And then get into the who, right? Patagonia has a very particular kind of person they want to be of service to. And awarepreneurs has and there's a little bit of overlap, but they're really quite different, and somebody who, a local farm, they have a who. and it's more about, you know, people who want quality food, who live in a certain region. Each person to think about their who. A mentor of mine says, when you try to help everybody, you wind up helping nobody.
Nobody. That's true. That's true.
Right. And I see a lot of people who are feeling really, you know, a lot of energy and want to be of service. But then you say, okay, cool. Like, why do you want to do this thing that we're talking about? And who do you want to help? I just want to help. I want to teach everybody meditation. I'm like, well, you're like 50 years too late, right? Like back, there was a time when meditation was new and nobody had heard about it. And just teaching meditation, or I want to teach yoga. I want to teach stress reduction. I want to, whatever. That was 50 years ago. It's a more mature market now. And the idea of, you know, being more thoughtful about who you're trying to connect with and be of service to is really important. And people can tell the difference of that person. It feels really kind, but kind of naive. I just want to help people. Well, yeah, that's what you say when you're like 18 years old and you're going into a social entrepreneur program or your first like bachelor's level social work program. But like somebody who has a real family they want to support, you can't afford to be that naive. We got to get more nuance than that. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be more nuanced. So why, who, then what? What are you offering? If you have fabulous tech skills, Shankar, you could use your tech skills to be of service to certain kinds of people. Or I've learned how to be pretty good at this whole social entrepreneur thing, right? So I offer certain things that for helping people make progress in a way that I've thought about a lot in the who. And then how. I have a podcast. Some people just say, well, Paul launched a podcast and it gets him lots of clients. I should launch. Well, the how is the last step, right? I thought about why, I thought about who, I thought about what, this membership community that has 6 or 7 different levels. And then, you know, then we get into the strategy, right? But a lot of people want to jump right into the what. I'm going to do this class and I'm going to do this, like podcasting's really hot right now. It is 42% increase in listens since the pandemic happened globally. But just launching a podcast doesn't mean you're going to make a livelihood out of it. It's more complicated than that. And these questions of why, who, what, and how, whether you're looking to be a really great addition to an existing team or whether you're looking to launch your own thing, these are questions that social entrepreneurs ask with nuance. And right now, I think we're pretty much all social entrepreneurs, whether we're going to be an intrapreneur, meaning you go do it within a company, or you're an entrepreneur, you go launch your own thing. If you can't answer those questions and you're just like, hire me and let me help people, you come across as like somebody who hasn't done the work yet. So go do the work on those questions. And then I'm seeing people really be able to do this bothness, help people in really significant, meaningful ways, and to be able to support their families and live a quality life.
You know, Paul, you reminded me. I was going and doing these leadership workshops over the last few years, face to face in communities, and then came Corona following me. Literally, I went from India to South Korea in February, and as soon as I reached there, I see masks everywhere.
You're like, uh-oh, something's different here, right?
Something is different. And they said, if you want to stay here, we'll have to test you. And I'm sorry, but if the test turns out positive, we will have to quarantine you. And
Yeah.
I don't speak Korean, maybe like 7, 8 sentences. That's it. So I said, I packed my bags and I said, 안녕하세요, 감사합니다, thank you very much. And then I came back to San Francisco. And I told them, do you know the coronavirus has been on my trail? They're like, no, it's in China, maybe Korea. It's not coming here.
Yeah.
Less than 3 weeks later, it was in San Francisco. I packed my bags again and came to Mexico. I did a couple of workshops, but I realized one thing. I couldn't run away. I was in the fight, flight, or freeze. I was in the flight mode at that time. My goal was to go around the world and do workshops, but I had to pause and ask, why am I going? I'm going to meet global communities. Exactly what you're saying. I didn't go through this formal process, but just to reiterate what you said, why am I going around the world to meet global communities? And if that's the case, do I have to physically go around the world? No. then I realized that I'm in a Latino place here. People speak Spanish and some people speak Portuguese. So why not learn the language? So I found global communities, and I'm actually speaking to many people online through social media, through Zoom calls, through chat sessions, and sometimes very rarely, even in person. It's much rarer now because of social distancing, but not just learning about Espanol, but about the culture. What
Yes.
is of value to them and so on. And so that was my intention. So I'm not anymore physically going. And then the question is, who do I want to meet? So this time I said, I want to meet people of Espanol origin, but it takes time. So meanwhile, I'll also connect with India and Pakistan and South Asia. And I do that separate times. But it's so valuable, what you're saying. And I'm so grateful that you're putting it in such simple words that start with the why, then the who, then what you're going to do, and then how. Because in conventional thinking, people jump. At least the first two questions are kind of, you
Everybody
know,
wants to talk about what and how. And I'm like, yeah, tell me
yeah,
why and who, and you'll be fine. And if you skip those two, you can talk about what and how
yeah.
all day
And
long. And
in fact, when I was launching this just series of talks, the first question people said, "What's a revenue model?" I said,
exactly.
I said, honestly, I don't believe in revenue models anymore.
Mm,
What do you mean? How will you monetize it? I said, this is my time to give back.
mm,
My monetization will be if anybody gets helped in this talk between you and me, Paul, if even one person benefits, I got my money back.
nice.
In other words, I learned so much from people like Paul, people like Ben, many of my gurus and teachers in India, many of my friends in business school, in medical school at Stanford, everywhere, wherever I went, I had mentors.
Mm.
I remember at one point we were even trying to call it mentorpreneurs. We were playing around with the term. Remember that?
I remember that was a while back. Yeah,
That was
I
about
do.
eight
That
years,
was
10
a
years
while.
ago.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say 8 or 10 years ago.
So
Yeah.
how did you come up finally with the name Awarepreneurs? Because that was after I left India, as after I left the United States to go back to serve in India.
Yeah,
Tell us
we
a little bit about the history.
yeah, there'd been an earlier iteration that grew a very large, I think we had 24,000 people in a Facebook group or 22,000. It was huge and it got very complicated, especially when
Wisdompreneurs, right?
it's called
Wisdompreneurs.
Wisdompreneurs.
I was
And
in that.
it got complicated, things in the US. This was when things were getting very polarized in the US in the 2016 election and, after that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And we needed to kind of reboot. People were making a lot of assumptions about what my time it wasn't working. Let's just say it wasn't working. And we needed to reboot and come up with a different model. So yeah, we rebranded, closed that group down, started with a smaller, went to this, affordable membership model instead of like free, because people were like, getting into these heinous conflicts with each other and then wanted me to referee them because I was the one who called the party. Like,
And
I'm
you
trying to
wouldn't do
run a
that.
business, like, 22,000 people. There was a conflict like every day. It was crazy. So yeah, so we rebooted it, rebranded it, and went to a different model. And that was about 3 years ago, and started podcasting and really kind of, got more clear who we're for. It wasn't, we're really focused on the people who they want to help, but they understand that social entrepreneurship doesn't happen by accident. There's some work involved, and you need to be comfortable with things like having something to sell. And how do you talk about that in a way that doesn't feel pushy or like arrogant, but also like, you know, I have a I have a kid. This is my livelihood. I don't do this just because it feels good, although it does feel good. It's my livelihood. So I've made it my business to learn certain skills and aptitudes. And that's who we wanted to have in this community, people who had a deep sense of practice and service, but also people who are treating it like this is a real business, not something that I just kind of do for fun. It's not a hobby. And that's who our audience is. And that's why we rebranded, to kind of make sure people knew this isn't that just like I'm a social media warrior, sometimes called, right? Facebook warrior. I'm just here to pick fights with somebody who whatever, I got nothing better to do. No, this is a business and I want to treat it like that. I want to be in a community of people who treat it like that. So we rebranded 3 years ago.
Wow, wow. And again, I would love to get the URL of your Awarepreneurs and all the different initiatives that you are currently involved in, so that if anybody wants to participate, and this is not an advertisement, this is how we share in every single session of what are the options that are available. And as I've never paid you one penny, Paul, I know that. But we've learned so much from each other. You come to our home. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to your home just
I
because
know.
of
I
lockdown.
wish I was
But
looking
I
forward to
will.
that.
I will.
Yes.
And but there's so much give and take that happens in these communities, way beyond the currency exchange. The money is important, but far more than that is that intentionality. What am I trying to do? Why am I doing it? With whom am I going to create this community? And then even the community have asked the same questions. What are we going to do in this community, and how will it make changes in our lives as social entrepreneurs, as aware entrepreneurs? So I'm so grateful this has come so far, and I haven't had a chance to catch up with you, but please give us all that information either now or later so we can have that available to anybody interested.
Sure.
And also, do you have any closing words after that for what
Yeah.
else can people do?
Everything we do is at the website awarepreneurs.com, and that's the first.
Awarepreneurs.com. Okay,
Yep.
and
The
I'll.
first part of the word awareness, right? Aware. And the second part of the word entrepreneurs, plural. So awarepreneurs.com. And our podcast is free. And, I think we just published 126th episode today. So it's literally,
Wow,
each episode's
wow.
about 55 minutes. So, there's like 120 hours of content there of some of the leading people in this space. It's all free. And if somebody did want to find out about the membership community, that's the information's there as well. But just go to awarepreneurs.com. You can get a hold of me if you have questions via the email, the contact form. So you want to pitch us an episode, everything's at the website.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Because people who are interested in telling about their work, they can be a part of this Awarepreneurs podcast too.
We get
If
about
it's
100 pitches. Yeah, we get about 100 people a week who for 2 seats. So yes, I wind up saying no a lot, but yes, we hear
yeah.
fabulous stories. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And again, I'm so grateful. We never got a chance to catch up like this after I came back to the US and now that I'm in Mexico. But luckily, I think we are in the same time zone as well.
I think
Uh,
we are. Yeah, I'm in Mountain
yeah,
Time. Are you Pacific or are you're Mountain Time?
Central just now. In other words, it's 11:45 here.
Oh, okay. So I'm an hour behind you. I got it. Okay, cool.
But it's such a pleasure and such a joy to be with you again. And I still remember walking into, because somehow I found it late, the session, the breakout session, and I rushed in. And as people were dispersing, 700-800 people are dispersing, all I need is a hug. That was my tagline
I
in
remember
those
that. I
days.
was the very first. I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but he sure seems pretty happy, right? Yeah.
And again, that right now that offer is on hold. There's a virtual hug available anywhere. No physical hugs for now, but the reality is that that need for closeness, the need for authenticating and saying, yes, I'm with you because I've seen your work, I've heard about your work, and I want to experience your work. And yeah, at the time when I got to know you, it was the Wisdompreneur experiment with 20,000 people. So I was a part of that. I benefited because I was there very early with you. And I also saw the chaos that was ensuing. Speaking of chaos, this whole program is about how do we evolve through chaos. And what you gave an example was of letting go of that community of 24,000 people because of the chaos, uncontrollable chaos it had created. Not because of any one person doing it. It's just the way it was structured. And then structuring something small is beautiful.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah. And
you have
if I
something.
was going to leave one thing is don't, keep looking for that thing of being of service. It goes back to what this woman told me when I was 17 years old. Have a practice, focus on being of service. And then like you just said, Shankar, in these 13 years that I've been doing this, it's been an important lesson not to get my fingernails like dug. It has to look like you try things. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that kind of works sort of, but that also was a mess in another way. And all right, I'm going to change it or adopt it or completely rebrand it or whatever. Like, but the intent of who I've been wanting to serve, that hasn't moved much in 13 years. It's just
Yeah.
getting better at better. The why has gotten really crisper, but it hasn't changed much. The who hasn't changed much. Now I'm getting really much more into the details of the what and the how, and it took me 13 years, and I still
Wow.
make mistakes, right? So that's what I want to leave listeners. Stay with it and keep looking for the nuances and be willing to let go of what's not working. Or when the coronavirus hits, there's going to be changes when big things come along, but stay dedicated to listening to your why, to your who, and then work with your what and your how as you land on those first two. And you're going to find a way to be of deep service, and you'll be fine economically if you really let those steer you. If you go chasing things right now, there's a lot of humans chasing jobs right now, chasing money, chasing whatever they think is the shiny object of the moment. Let your values help you guide these very, very chaotic times. And you're going to be okay, even if there's moments that are challenging.
Wow, thank you. And I think with that, we'll conclude again. And if there are a lot of questions from people, either to me or directly to you, if there's a need, we can have another conversation around it. But
Be
I'm
happy
so
to.
grateful I get this opportunity to be of service, and with no expectation except passing on what I learned from lots of people before me. Hundreds of people were there on my journey, and it's a never ending journey. So I keep running into Pauls and I keep running into people. So thank you again. And
Thank you, Shankar.
thanks a lot. And I think you just had your Passover at home. Is that right?
I did. Well, we did it online because I have family members all over the place. But yes, we
Oh,
just
okay. So
recently
you had a
had
Zoom
Passover.
call or something
We
like
had
that.
a Zoom Passover, yes, with people all up and down the East Coast and other countries. Yes. So,
And we had a Yugadi, it's called the Spring Festival, and many people, even my friends from the Muslim world, just had the Ramzan Eid at
yes,
home.
they sure did. Yes.
So it's such a, yeah, of course, there's Good Friday and Easter Sunday and everything.
Yeah.
So again, thank you. I think this is time for rejuvenation. Any questions, let us know. We will have the links where you can ask questions, and please continue the dialogue. Thank you again.